to the Piedmont Triad Podcast.
Before I get too old, I'm gonna head down to Muscle Shoals. Baby, you can meet me at the station.
Welcome to another episode of the Piedmont Triad Podcast, where we explore the weird, artistic, and unusual aspects of the Piedmont Triad area of North Carolina. I'm your host, David Locklear, and on this episode, we talk to Damon Beaty, host of the horror movie podcast, Guess What? You're Wrong, where he and a different guest host talk in depth about a specific horror film on each episode. Damon and I met when he posted on Reddit asking if anyone was interested in discussing old horror movies as a guest on his show. With me being a big horror movie nerd since I was a child, I reached out to him about making an appearance, and he was gracious enough to have me on multiple times, where we have talked about movies such as My Bloody Valentine and the great American film classic Llamageddon. When I found out he was based in North Carolina, I knew he would be a great guest to have on the Piedmont Triad Podcast. So, on today's episode, Damon and I discuss the evolution of his podcast, how history can be reflected through horror stories, and my recent appearance on Guess What? You're Wrong, where we talk about the divisive new film Skinamarink. Let's see. So you're the host of Guess What? You're Wrong podcast, and So I know that right now it's a lot more focused on movies, a lot of horror movies in particular. But it started out a little bit differently. Can you sort of tell us about the evolution from where it began to how it got to where it is now?
Yeah, when I first started off, I knew I wanted a podcast. I've been listening to podcasts for years. I knew that I had something to say, but didn't know really how to go about it. Because I didn't want to be a carbon copy of what everybody else was out there doing. But at first, the first few episodes of Guess What? You're Wrong were a lot different than what they are now. I did go over some comic books early on. One of my favorite comic book groups out there, the Absolute Comic Book Group, did a big review on what they put out. But then I tried to go a little bit into the news and political aspects of it, but I didn't really want. While I had a lot to say about those things, I really didn't want to put another divisive voice out there for people to complain about. I even started off early on doing stories for my kids. There's a couple of episodes where I'm just telling stories specifically for my kids. But then I didn't really want to continue with a podcast that was going to be divisive for anybody. Going back to the political statements and the cultural stuff that I was delving into. Mm-hmm. And I really thought to myself, I love horror. And I listened to a couple of horror movie podcasts, but I wanted to do things a little bit different. So I said, I delved in. I was like, I'm going to do horror movie podcast, and I started off with doing like commentary style, where basically I would watch the movie, and as I was watching the movie, I do kind of a commentary alongside the movie, which it's evolved to what it is now. I still do some of the commentary sometimes, but I delved in. I spoil the hell out of everything I talk about. So, you've been on a few of my shows, my episodes, and you know that we discuss a movie from start to finish.
Yeah. We talk about it in detail.
Yeah, and everybody that listens to it, that's my disclaimer I put off in the beginning. We're gonna completely ruin the movie for you. So if you care about spoilers, don't listen.
Yeah.
And I really, really wanted to, and I enjoy this because it doesn't matter what you think politically or culturally or where you're at, if you belong to this group or that group. If you love horror movies, we have a commonality there, and we can discuss horror movies.
Yeah.
And to me, that's important.
Yeah, because it really is one of those types of cultural things that does seem to be completely across all interests and opinions and whatnot, because it's it really kind of deals with I guess all aspects of, when you think about the spectrum of political and cultural opinions and whatnot. Horror will go into conservative ideas and liberal ideas, and it'll go into a lot of trans and gay issues, and there's not really a topic that won't be discussed or criticized with horror. And so it is kind of a strange little melting pot.
And the great thing about horror as well is that when they dive into those, when you think of like when they dive into aspects of like homosexuality or, the right or the left politically, or, this whole thing, it's making a cultural statement because that's what's important these days.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like dwelling on those cultural issues where it's making it, a completely homosexual film or a completely right-leaning film or a completely left-leaning film. It's a horror movie. Mm-hmm. So while you may have aspects from all these different cultural perspectives in it, ultimately you can enjoy it for what it is, a horror movie. Yeah. And it goes to, there was a new movie that was put out not too long ago about the trans at like a camp, kind of a scared straight camp kind of thing.
Them.
Yeah, and then we have like the cultural statements from the movie that was just what's the movie that just came out, like Get Out, that kind of thing.
Nope, and stuff like that.
Yeah, we have those things, and even the cultural statements from the movies that came out about what was that? The Purge. Mm-hmm. All these movies are making political statements. They're making cultural statements.
Yeah.
But when you're watching the movie, you don't sit down and pick it apart and like, oh, well, this guy is talking about this politically. And no, you watch the movie and you enjoy it for what it is, or you dislike it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly, it fits into the horror genre, and it brings people together because of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's actually kind of interesting to look back on old horror movies and see what had been sort of a cultural benchmark according to the horror of the time. When you got movies like in the 60s is Peeping Tom, and then you've got a lot of sort of feminist rape revenge fantasies in the 70s, and just things like that. Oh yeah, like a lot of apocalyptic type of horror movies in the 80s because fear of the nuclear disaster in the Cold War, and it's a really interesting time capsule to see, I guess, a very different perspective of history. When I might be assigning too much importance to history, to horror, but I don't know. I kind of feel like you could look at it from that perspective and maybe see history a little bit differently.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you're assigning too much to horror because it directly reflects the popularity of, in my opinion, the popularity of what's going on in the horror industry at the time period directly reflects what's going on culturally and politically in the world. Like you were saying, we had the even in the early 70s, we had the blaxploitation movies that were coming out. Count Blackula, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was the black community getting their own genre of movies and being able to do their own thing. And that directly reflected how they were trying to climb ladders in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
All the way on to, like you said, the post-apocalyptic movies in the 80s. Everybody was the Cold War. It directly reflected the Cold War. Everybody was afraid of those things. So I think that horror plays a huge part in our world and in people's lives. Well, they don't necessarily understand it. There's a lot of people who don't like horror.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't like being scared or whatnot. But I think that it's something that's definitely something that people should take more notice of because it directly reflects how people can not only put their viewpoints and their cultural viewpoints and stuff on film for everybody to see, but it also brings together people under those same pictures. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that a lot of the times it's kind of dismissed as, I guess, the type of genre that's sort of lowbrow, and it's never really, well, it's not, I shouldn't say never, but it's not given consistently the credit for being as clever as it is. There's so many times you find out, like, for example, The Shining is a great horror example of using horror as a means of explaining alcoholism and child abuse, most likely sexual child abuse, if you believe some of the theories about the movie. And, if you're just watching it, like you said earlier, just outside looking in and just kind of watching it as a horror movie, okay, it's a ghost story about a dad. He loses his mind. Okay, cool. It's still entertaining. But yeah, when you start really peeling back the layers of the onion, and this is a lot of horror movies, as you find out, it's really trying to put forward the idea that maybe a very important subject is not getting enough attention.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
So what is your favorite horror movie?
Boy, my son actually asked me this over this weekend. And I can't say that there's one specific favorite, because I break all horror movies down into different genres. We have monster horror, we have real life horror, survival horror, horror adjacent movies. We have comedy horror. And so I got to say, boy, supernatural horror. I got Evil Dead.
Okay.
It's got to be one of my favorites. We're talking monster horror, The Thing. I love The Thing. Carpenter's The Thing. I have favorites in every genre, pretty much. But there's movies that I can watch over and over and over again, and all of the Evil Dead franchise. Even the more current ones. Ash vs. Evil Dead. All of those, I can watch them over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Same thing with The Thing. I can watch The Thing 150 times, and it never gets tiring.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, with both of those franchises too. Well, I know The Thing's not a franchise, but yeah, one of those being a franchise and the other one, being just a classic. Yeah, I can watch it over and over again. Same with me. I'm like Halloween. I could watch the original 1,000 times. It wouldn't ever be boring to me. I would always enjoy it. I mean, like, I guess with more modern horror for me, it would have to be something like The Devil's Rejects. That's definitely, I'd say, a more, well, shit, it might not even be really contemporary anymore at this point. That did come out a little while ago. But, I thought that was one of the best horror movies I had ever seen. And, yeah, it's fun kind of, finding these new favorites. Like you and I just talked about Llamageddon. I'm pretty sure that's going to start coming up as a good party movie to throw on in the background, and everybody will have a good time.
Absolutely. And I can't leave out, I gotta say, one of my all-time favorites, which gets a lot of hate, is Rawhead Rex. Clive Barker.
Yeah, that's an awesome movie.
I completely love that movie, and I have such fond memories of it when I was younger. And when watching that with my mom, when I was way too young to be watching. I don't think she understood what we were getting into. It scared the shit out of her, but I loved it. And I still love it to this day, and I still watch it. I could pick out, how the costume looks terrible, and the dialogue and everything is terrible. But I love the movie. I just love it.
Yeah, it's one of those ones, if you watched it now, you wouldn't have near the amount of reverence for it that you do because you saw it when you were a kid. Because I was the same way. When I first saw it, I think I was maybe 12, and I was over at a buddy's house. It was me and a couple of buddies. We were just staying up watching movies, and we had gone to the video store, and one of us was just like, oh, this, the cover looks cool. Let's rent this. And we did. And it was just fun. We were all really surprised at how much we enjoyed it. And, it's hard to convince people in a current climate why this movie is so fucking good, because I'm seeing it from their perspective and I understand what they're seeing. But it's like, there's the 12-year-old me that saw this, and this fucking rules, and I really wish I could give you some of that, but I can't. So I just hope maybe you can tap into it just a little bit. Man, well, and I'm the same way. I can't really pick a really good favorite movie when it comes to horror, but it's like I think I have favorites within the genre, and I appreciate sometimes when there are these movies that will kind of throw in little horror elements, like when Sam Raimi did Spider-Man 2, and
Yeah.
when Doc Ock kind of, his arms become aware, that was one of the best Evil Dead scenes in a non-Evil Dead movie I had ever seen.
Yeah, that was awesome. That's still that's got to be one of my favorite of the whole Spider-Man films, of all the Spider-Man films. I don't really like the new ones pretty much, but Spider-Man 2 from Raimi has got to be one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like even to this day, I think the first is just okay. But that second one, man, it hit all the beats perfectly. And yeah, it's like it was enough of a horror nod to us nerds, but it still maintained itself being a Spider-Man movie, but he throw in those weird ass angles that he's always notorious for. Just to throw us little nuggets like that. I thought that was cool. I love that Sam Raimi has never distanced himself from his horror roots, like people like Johnny Depp and whatnot. I love that he always kind of gives a nod to everybody who sort of loved and supported him from the beginning.
Oh yeah, he certainly does.
Now, well, tell me a little bit. So you live in North Carolina now, but you said you are from Ohio. So where, what, were you born in Ohio originally? What was the story there?
Yeah. I grew up in Northwest Ohio. Anybody that has ever lived in Ohio more than likely lives in Florida now, but they can tell you that Ohio is gray for the most part of the year. It's just gray. Wintertime, we get a little bit of white, and then it turns gray from all the mud, sleet, and snow. I left Ohio in 1999, went to Florida. My original plan was I was going to be in Florida for a few years, and then I had planned on moving to Tennessee. But, meet a girl, have some kids. Next thing you know, I was in Florida for 24 years, 23 years, something like that. And I was like, wasn't a big fan of Florida. I mean, the heat will kill you. I mean, it sucks. It really it's terrible.
Does. That humidity is rough.
Yeah. And you get that like 11 months out of the year. There's 1 month, that you look forward to where it gets down into the 50s and you enjoy that month. And then after that, it's just right back to, suffocating heat.
Yeah.
So I had wanted to get out of Florida for a long time. My kids that I had were finally old enough. They're adults. I had a job offering up here in North Carolina, and I said, why the hell not? Let's do it. So here I am in the Triangle area. Well, that's where I work anyway.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the industry that you do work in?
Biological safety certifications. There's a lot of biological, pharmacies, pharmaceutical stuff up in the Triangle area. And I work for a company. We basically just go in and make sure all the equipment is working like it's supposed to.
Oh, okay. So are you on the road like a good bit of the time, like going from place to place?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I can get on board with a gig like that. I always like a job where I'm going from place to place and moving around.
Yeah, I got, let me see, like last week I was at Duke for a little bit. Went over to Greenville, North Carolina. Go up to Winston-Salem. Down here to Sanford, Pfizer area. So, there's no telling. I mean, they've sent me over to Boone, North Carolina, Appalachian State University.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Love it out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I love going up there.
All over the place, all over North Carolina. So it's fun.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah. You sound like I'm sort of a similar person. It's like, I can't be stuck in a place all day long, just in one spot it's like, I'd have to get out of here. It's like, I got to venture and see different places during the day. Cause you can go crazy real quick being in one spot all day.
Yeah. I mean, we have sometimes, we're working, sometimes you're out there 12, 13 hours a day, but then sometimes you're out there working for 5 hours and then you're done and you go home. So it equals out. Even the times when we're working, 12, 13 hours a days, it's not like, you're not like building a house. It's not like huge, hard manual labor. There's a lot of technical stuff, a lot of technical know-how. You have to, you're dressed in PPE to get in a certain place. So sometimes you got to wear Tyvek suits. Sometimes you got to wear respirator systems and stuff. But you're going in there and you're dealing with stuff that is needed. It's a necessity. A lot of these pharmaceutical places are making pharmaceuticals for people that need it. Cancer treatment drugs, a lot of stuff that helps with childhood ailments, diseases. So you're going in there to make sure that these things that they're making are getting to the patients, and they're being made in a place that's clean and that's healthy and it's doing what it's supposed to do. So that way, in the end, the people that are getting these things that are being made aren't getting bad or dirty or defective products.
Oh, that's cool. That's really interesting to be able to go into all these places. And so it's like, if you go in there and you find that there is anything that's kind of irregular, I guess you guys really do have the power to shut things down, right?
Oh yeah, we can. Now I can honestly say that for the majority of the time, we don't run into any problems. There have been times that we run into problems with people that just don't really care. Smaller places, all they want to do is see that bottom dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times where we've had to shut them down and tell them that, hey, you can't do anything in here until this is fixed, because you're putting people in danger. They don't always like to hear that. But honestly, I come from the point of view is I don't care.
Yeah.
I hurt your feelings because you keep a dirty, lab, but it's your fault. Fix it or you'll be out of business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how some people can't really disconnect that sometimes. The idea that, well, yeah, I did something wrong, but, it's like, no, you don't get to, in this particular situation. You really have to fix this. Otherwise you're not going to be eating in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
So, yeah. And I worked in a couple of places like that before, where I have to go in and out of different environments. And, one of the ones recently that I had to go into consistently were these assisted living facilities. And man, when COVID was just starting to calm down, the level of PPE you had to put on to walk through this place, like not even to do anything, just to walk through, it was unreal. And I imagine that's probably a pretty common occurrence for you. That sounds like that would probably be a daily thing. My COVID outfit is probably just you going to work every day.
Well, not every day. It's frequently, when I get my schedule and I see that I'm going to like college labs, I'm happy because I don't have to put on any special PPE. I know I'm just going in there to certify their, college lab equipment. Mm-hmm. But when I'm starting to see these big facilities like Pfizer, like, Novo Nordisk, these kinds of places, I'm like, I'm going to be wearing Tyvek suits. I'm going to be putting on all kinds of stuff, all kinds of PPE. And I'm like, oh gosh.
Can't be wearing flip-flops.
No flip-flops at all. A lot of steel-toe boots. You actually go through a lot of steel-toe boots.
Man. So, okay. So you got into this industry. Now, do people know that you work with, that you host a horror movie podcast, or do they sort of know that you're sort of like are you the horror nerd around the office, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, some people know. Some people are surprised when they find out. Mm-hmm. Some people are like, I never liked horror. And, for the most part, people are interested. They go, oh yeah. I think they're more interested in the fact that I'm a podcaster, not really the content. They're just interested in the fact that, oh, how do you do that? How'd you get into that? Oh, how long you been doing it? Who does all your stuff for you? Yeah. I'm like,
Me?
There's a few people that actually, yeah. And if you want to keep things on a cheap, you do it yourself.
Oh yeah. Having a producer, that's rich people bullshit.
Yeah, I don't make enough money for that. But there are times I've talked to people. I'm like, oh, you do horror? Oh, okay. And they go on having a talk for an hour about favorite horror movies.
Yeah.
And what I thought about the new movie came out, or a big thing is when Megan came out. Boy, anybody that knew that I was had a horror movie podcast, they wanted to know what my views were on Megan. And I said, well, you know what? We'll listen to the podcast. I just put one out on it.
Yeah, there you go. There you see.
Yep.
That's it. That's it. That's how you. That's how you get those subscribers. That was good.
Yep. That was good.
I know.
But yeah, I always get the question. Even family members, people that know that I'm podcast, they always call me. Hey, there's this movie coming out. Is it any good? I'm like, I always tell my family, I'm like, you understand? I got anywhere from 5 to 20 movies in line that I'm watching the podcast about. This movie's coming out next week. I probably don't have that in my queue yet, so I can't tell you what I think about it yet.
Well, and that's kind of one of the good things about that topic is it's, you can choose to do a new movie when it comes out or not. You can wait until after other people have seen it and stuff like that. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's not like if you don't necessarily have to strike when the iron is hot, quote unquote. You can jump to it much later and people will still listen to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, occasionally, movies pop out like Megan. When Megan came out, I was like, I was highly anticipating seeing that movie. So I knew that I was going to do a podcast about it. And, we go back to December when that movie Violent Night came out. Yeah. I was highly anticipating that movie coming out. So I knew I was going to do a podcast on it right away. But, everything else, I have a media server that I put all kinds of movies on that I want to do podcasts about. And there's, at any given time, there's 5 to 20 movies in there. Mm-hmm. So, as I do a couple, I add a couple more to that list. So it gets bigger and bigger. Yeah. But it's fun. I enjoy it,
Yeah. It's fun to, to be able to, for lack of a better phrase, monetize your hobby. It's like, I'm like, I do this because I do enjoy it, but, I do get to write it off because it's technically a business expense, but it's like, I don't really make money doing this, but it's kind of nice being able to, turn it into something that could have the potential to be lucrative at some point. And I enjoy that.
Spent so much damn money on equipment.
No.
I never even thought about writing it off. Thanks for that.
Oh yeah, I've written off some ridiculous things, but it was technically a business expense. At one point years ago, I was writing a beer column for this local magazine, and I would do like just some sort of a local beer related thing, and then I would do a little beer review at the end of it. So for about 3 years, I got to write off the beer I purchased as a research business expense. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of is that I turned, my budding alcoholism into a business expense. And I think that truly is the American dream.
That's awesome. Yeah, I do love me some beer, I tell you. Whew.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I've as I've gotten older, I've had to very much chill out because my body has decided to give me those warnings. The whole, dude, you're not 23 anymore, and this will have consequences.
Yeah, your recovery is not going to take 5 hours now. It's going to take 5 days. Yeah. So calm down. Yeah, I mean, I've started brewing my beer a little bit myself. There's a lot to it, a lot more to it than I had thought. Mm-hmm. I thought it was just, you throw a bunch of stuff in a pot and you let it ferment, but there's a lot more to it. Yeah. And, I make it at 5 gallons at a time, so I'm getting a few cases out of it. Yeah. But I don't drink beer like I used to, so it's like the last batch of beer that I made was a holiday ale, a spiced ale, mm-hmm. and I had 5 cases in my refrigerator for like 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I would drink beer here or there, and little by little. But then, my family came up here this past week, and my oldest son, he's old enough to drink now. So I was like, dude, whatever is left in there, you can have it. Just drink it. I don't care. And, he was happy because he didn't have to go out and buy beer. So,
oh, yeah.
It worked out pretty well.
And tasty homemade beer, too, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've really been looking at a kegging system. Because bottling beer sucks.
Yeah, I've done that too. Where you're having to cap them individually, that takes forever.
Yeah, and then if you don't tighten one enough, and then you put it in, to start it's a mess.
Yeah. Oh, you'll appreciate this. When years ago, when I first started getting into home brewing, I haven't done it in a while, but when I first did it, it was I did several really successful batches, and then I decided to get kind of ambitious, and I found this recipe for a Russian imperial stout. And one of the things you had to do to really maximize the flavor was you had to bottle ferment them in a refrigerator for 6 months. So I was like, okay, all right, I can do that. That's no problem. And so I did just that. I bottle fermented them for 6 months. Opening day, I get it out, and it was one of those Grolsch type bottles, with the rubber seals and stuff. And so I popped the top, and it didn't make any noise. And I was like, oh, fuck. And so I take a sip, and it is flat as a circle. And I go get another one, pop it, no sound. And so what had happened was these rubber seals had apparently shrunk just a little bit. And any of the carbonation that was supposed to have built up just went right out of the bottles. And so I wasted 6 months. I was, man, I was fucking devastated. That was a sad day, to say the least.
I can imagine. Jeez.
So
Russian Imperial stouts are good.
I know.
A good kick you in the teeth kind of drink there. I mean, whew.
Yeah. They're definitely the sipping type. I've made those. I guess the one that I made that I really enjoyed and a friend of mine really enjoyed was I made this espresso stout where I would ferment them. I would bottle ferment them, but I would pour a shot of espresso in each one. And it was good. It was basically like you got sort of a, I guess you could call it a cocaine drunk. It was like, you were down, but you were up at the same time. So it was, it was a fun beverage.
Yeah. And bottling, I mean, it's just so labor intensive, it's like, geez. So I'm going to get me a kegerator and just start kegging them.
That'd be cool. Yeah. And then you can, maybe set up some sort of like a tapping system somewhere in your house and have tap beer. That's my dream.
That's my dream as well.
Right. I love how we've gone from horror to it's become like, the home brew hour.
Yeah. Home brew hour.
This old brew.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it's fun. You look for one thing I've noticed that as I get older, cause I'm 49 now. So as I get older, I'm thinking about, things to occupy my time that aren't necessarily going to cost me an arm and a leg like I used to. Mm-hmm. Beer up front. Yeah. I mean, when you're brewing beer up front, you got a nice cost because you're buying all the ingredients. But in the end run, you're making like five cases of beer.
Yeah.
So, depending on how much you're spending, what type of beer you make, it can save you some money in the end run.
Yeah,
it's the same with podcasting. Up front, I put a lot of money to get some. Well, when I first started off podcasting, I had this little crappy microphone that I was trying to talk into, and you can definitely tell some of my earlier episodes. They're like, damn, what the hell was he talking into that goddamn cup when he was recording or something?
I feel you on that one. Yeah.
But because I wasn't really sure if it was something I was going to stick with in podcasting, but then as I was like, yeah, I love doing this. I started spending money on equipment, and soundboards and mics and boom arms and all this stuff. And I spent a lot up front for it, but in the end run, it's paid off because you got good equipment and it lasts.
Yeah. Yeah. Like right now, as we've been talking today, I've kind of realized I'm using a newer mic. And I like the way it makes my voice sound, but I'm also taking notes and going, I think I need some sort of a foam sound barrier near it because I think it's going to be a little bit echoey, but it's like, that's what I do all the time now is I'm constantly trying to take notes and improve. And I'm going, okay, I need a better mic. I need to do this. Yeah. So I completely understand what you're talking about, but it's like when you're able to make it sound decent, where you're going, this is pretty good. I don't know. It's kind of it's a very proud moment when you feel like you've pulled that off.
Yeah, that's what I got to that moment when I finally, I got me a decent microphone. I'm saving up my pennies to get me a Shure SM7B in the future. But the microphone I'm using, and it comes to a point, especially when you're using your digital, your workstation, that you're editing all your audio and everything in, and then you're creating vocals and you're using voice modulators and using all this stuff to create stuff, and then at the end when you put it all together, you're like, wow, I made that.
Yeah,
that's something that I did. That's pretty cool, and you take some pride in it, and it's fun.
Yeah, it's cool. And it's like you kind of enjoy the idea behind tweaking it a little bit, going, oh, well, what could I do to make it, be a little bit better? Or maybe what could I do to change this over here? And how could I incorporate blah, blah, blah? Yeah, it's I think a lot of it has to do with probably being a sound nerd on some level, which I've always kind of been, and which is ironic because I think so much of my stuff sounds completely like shit, but I try, but I think you're probably in the same boat as well.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely when I have something for a specific episode, like we recorded an episode on Skinamarink, and I had something in my head where I knew how I wanted this to sound. I wanted to take that old classic kids song, the Skinamarink song, and I wanted to somehow incorporate that into an intro that I was trying to make for it. So, I knew I had it in my head of what I wanted it to sound like, and I just kept working at it until I got that sound, and it starts off all happy-go-lucky, but then you hear that static, it kind of like, it tears up and it fades out. And I whenever I'm doing a specific episode on a certain movie and I have an idea of I want something in there, I work at getting that piece until it's done. It's like I have the sound, I have the picture of what I want it to be in my head, and I just keep working on it until I get that.
Yeah.
And it usually works out. More times than not, it hasn't. But when it works out, you're like, wow, that was something that was in my head that I put. And it's another thing, like I said, you made it. It's something that you created, and you're proud of it. It's a pride thing.
Yeah.
Good.
And what's funny is, part of the reason that we're talking right now is because the equipment that when I talked to you beforehand that I was bragging so much about fucked up on me and ruined the interview. And so this is take two. What's that?
What'd you get? You got the Rode, right?
Yeah, I have the Rode mixer, the Rodecaster. Yeah.
Yeah.
What ended up happening, I actually did figure out what happened with the last time we were talking, was that I have these two Blue Yeti mics, which are USB mics, and they sounded fine, but come to find out that they were older, and when you hook them into the Rodecaster, there was some sort of odd feedback that wasn't really discernible when we were talking. But then when I started listening back to it, you could hear it, and then it was doing it over and over and over again, and it was just these two mics, and I tried everything imaginable. So it was like, okay, they're so old that they don't like this new equipment. So I ended up trading them in for a new Rode microphone, which I'm using right now, and I do like this. But yeah, it's like, the faulty equipment or equipment not communicating with each other completely screwed the pooch on our original interview. And here we are, talking about how trying to perfect it, it's just, it's such an irony, the way that I don't think people appreciate how much effort you put into your hobby,
Yeah. I mean, before I got my soundboard, my mixer, I had really thought about getting that Rodecaster. But I ended up going with the Tascam Mixcast. I don't know why. It was like a spur of the moment thing, but I've been extremely happy with it.
Yeah.
And it's, and one thing that I like that this type of equipment allows you to do is that I can record in two spots. So I record to the actual soundboard itself, it saves it there because it has an SD card, but then I can also record it on my computer.
Mm-hmm.
So right away I have two different copies. And it records different tracks. So as I'm recording, I have my track, and then I have your track, so I can edit each individual. I love it.
Yeah.
And this is something that, podcast nerds like us can get into, and we're like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, oh, wow, look at how it does that. And look, you don't even have to bother with how shitty this might sound. You can fix that individually,
Yeah, I tried showing my kids. I was going off on it when they were here. I was like, look at this. And then like, yeah, Dad, okay, can I watch TV now?
Yeah, could not give
right,
less of
ahead.
a fuck.
Yeah, they didn't care. It was fun.
Yeah, my family's the same way. It's like I've got all my shit just spread all over the place, and I'm just like, oh, look how cool this is, and you can make if I want, I can make sounds. I haven't had any use for the little sound thing, but I love that it's an option. I like that it's there, but they're like, yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm gonna go.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna. They're not even making an excuse.
I love the sound pads, that come with it. I mean, I don't. Depending on, I always pre-program some sounds, like depending on what movie that I got. I did a recording of Leprechaun in the Hood. Yeah. That's full of one-liners. With Leprechaun. So I made it. I put a lot of audio clips onto the sound pads for Leprechaun in the Hood. And of course I got all my favorites. Bruce Campbell. Screaming, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So
I love the sound pads. It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding a way of incorporating it, because I was watching, it was some kind of a commentary on YouTube for Nightmare on Elm Street 6 with a friend of mine. And they highlighted the one part where No, it wasn't Nightmare 6. I'm sorry. It was this movie with Fred Savage in it. It was a video game movie. I can't remember the name of it.
The Wizard?
The Wizard, yeah. So it was at some point in The Wizard, this YouTube video is making fun of The Wizard, and I guess the cool video game guy has the Power Glove from Nintendo.
Yeah.
And he just holds it up in obvious product placement and goes, "I love the Power Glove. It's awesome." And I was like, I want that shit on my soundboard. There's going to be a time where I'm going to need to hit that button, and it's going to be the perfect drop.
Some of these sounds I got in my sound pad here, I use them a lot. Most of the time I just pre-program for different specific episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I did recently, I did a recording for Night of the Living Dead. I had quite a few sound clips, set aside for that as well. Nice. It's fun to use,
Yeah.
Equipment's fun to use.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start playing with it. I think that it does seem like it will be fun. I'm going to have to figure out how I can successfully incorporate it into the format. I'd hate to be talking to somebody on some sort of serious subject and, the Power Glove is fucking awesome.
So your mom died when you were 5 years old. Yeah, the Power Glove is fucking awesome. No, that's not...
Sorry, I'm an ass. Oh,
Good
man.
times, man.
Yeah. Well, man, I will let you get going. We've been chatting about shit for 2 hours at this point. I should let you get back to your afternoon.
Lamageddon, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's something that everybody who's listening to this, they need to go listen to that. So I was a guest on Damon's his podcast, Guess What You're Wrong, for where we talked about the truly amazing and Oscar-worthy movie called Lamageddon. And I can't recommend this enough, so you should go and listen to Guess What You're Wrong and hear Damon and I talk about this just wonderful piece of film that God has given us today. So
yeah, that one after editing everything, that'll be coming out in a couple few weeks here, but definitely keep you posted on that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, man, let everybody know where they can find your podcast and what kind of fun stuff they can look forward to.
Yeah, I got Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. Guess What You're Wrong. Is the name of the podcast. I set up an Instagram account for the podcast. It's kind of slow growing. I'm getting used to posting stuff. I never even thought about putting my podcast on social media, honestly. But then everybody started asking about it, and I'm like, okay. Put it up. So I got an Instagram account. Guess what? You're wrong. Actually, I think on Instagram it's called Podcast You're Wrong, because Guess What You're Wrong was taken.
That's right. It was, because I tried to look it up. It was, I forgot who took it.
Yeah, it's just Podcast You're Wrong on Instagram. But that's it. We got some fun stuff coming up. I try and stick with seasonal horror as we're moving into springtime. Going to have a few more springtime horror movies coming up, moving into the summer as well. Always having a good, fun time. One thing you're going to get from me when you hear my podcast, I'm not in the movie industry. I don't pretend to be all knowledgeable about film school and all this stuff. I'm an average Joe Blow that likes horror movies. And when I talk about them, I talk about what I like and dislike. And if you're listening to my podcast, my opinion matters, yours doesn't. That's why it's called Guess What? You're Wrong.
There you go. That way you know exactly what you're getting into.
Yep, that's exactly what it is.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming back on with me, and I'm glad we were able to do Lamageddon. That was fun as shit.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
I got a few movies coming up here in the near future. I might drop you a line sooner rather than later if you don't mind.
Oh yeah. Let me know, and I'll see if I can sit down and chat with you about it, because it's fun, man. It's cool. I feel like you and I vibe on the same horror level, so this is cool. I enjoy this.
Yeah, it's great.
So that brings this episode of the Piedmont Triad podcast to a close. Big thanks to Damon for jumping on as a guest and for having me on his show as well. Make sure you go and listen and subscribe to Guess What? You're Wrong on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other major podcast platforms. Also, big thanks again to Matt Smith and the Cowboy Spankers for letting us use their tune, Not Tonight, as our theme music. Make sure to check them out on their Bandcamp page and all of the major streaming outlets. And thanks to my friend and artist Brian Falk for our logo artwork. And a big thanks to you for listening. Make sure you go to our newly launched website, PiedmontTriadPodcast.com, where you can find all of our episodes, and you will soon be able to support the Piedmont Triad Podcast. Make sure you also subscribe to the Piedmont Triad Podcast and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever the hell you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Instagram at Piedmont Podcast or Facebook at Piedmont Triad Podcast. Until next time, Triad.
Should keep on moving. You're like the devil when the sun goes down. Stay away from me. Well, I'm too far gone. There ain't nothing here to see, babe. So you best just move along.